And welcome to another episode of Logos Roundtable. This will be our fourth episode. Um, we've been doing this roundtable now for the last 4 weeks in a row on Sundays. Today we'll be talking about the topic will be the fallen. Can humans devolve? Uh, Today we have Steven Sorensen
Hello.
back with us for his, I believe, third time. Jan Irvin, obviously.
Hey, everybody.
And now we have a new guest today, Mark, with us.
Well, no, that's Chris. Mark is out today.
Oh, sorry, Chris. Sorry, we have a new
Hi,
Chris.
Thank you.
And I want to jump in and say something about Chris. Chris has been very generous and kind and has supported the show for, I don't know, years and years now. I can't even think how many years, but Chris has been doing the graphics, the images on the website, the music, some of the really popular songs that we played, Ain't Nobody, all of that stuff. Way back in the day, that was all Chris. Chris made the intro videos for the shows and stuff. So, huge thanks for Chris. And, so you've been a great help. It's great to have you on with us today, Chris. I've been wanting to have you on the show for a while. Introduce everybody to who you are and, encourage people to throw some coins your way for all of the help that you've done for years now behind the scenes.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. It's excellent to be here. I'm honored to have the opportunity.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Great to meet you, Chris. So,
You as well.
and I'm your host today. I guess I'm just going to be moderating, I guess. I'll do my best to try to give everybody a say on each one of these topics, and taking questions from the chat a little bit later on. Right off the bat, we're going to kind of try to define what we're trying to. The main goal of the show is to bring up a new topic, the fallen, kind of just define what we mean by that and get everybody's take on what that means to them, because obviously there are very many countless metaphors. I think for anyone who's been paying attention to what's going on in our culture nowadays, I think it's plain to see that we have a problem. We're going to try to be doing our best to address what maybe some of the causes of the problem is and kind of identify some of the specifics in our culture, because as anyone can see, the wheels are coming off of society, and we need to start talking about some of these serious topics, get a little bit more in depth in them. So we got an outline here. We're going to try to follow it. There's no way we're going to get through the whole entire thing, so we're just going to do our best to generalize, give everybody a few minutes to speak on each one of these points here. If anybody has anything to say right off the bat.
Well, a subtitle I came up for this episode was "The Divers of Diversity." So, and when you start looking at, we started looking up, and thanks to Holly, my wife, for helping me do some of the research for the show tonight. We were looking up the word diver versus diversity, and it's actually the same word, divers, like diverse with no E on the end, is how they used to spell diverse. But when you look it up, it's ironic because when you think of the fallen or diving down, falling down, divers, and then you have so-called diversity, and then from that, the root of that is obviously division, divisiveness, etc.
Yes, very interesting. So let's go around and get everybody's take real quick on what would you say a good entry level sort of description of what topics we're going to be discussing when we say fallen. What do we mean? Go ahead, Stephen.
Well, when I'm talking about the fallen, I'm talking about things that are self-defeating type behaviors, negative thoughts. Generally speaking, like things that are not in your best interest, like getting so drunk that you're just puking everywhere and you can't remember what your address is, or maybe spending like thousands of dollars on clothes and not making room in your budget for food or rent, and eventually crashing that way. Basically, anything that's not in your best interest, that's going to help you succeed, in the future.
For sure. Yeah, that's a good general description for us. What do you think, Jan?
Well, to me, what we're going to be discussing, well, it's as Steve said, any type of negative, iniquitous behavior that does not benefit your long-term livelihood. And furthermore, to step back and take a look at that, your family's livelihood and your generation's livelihood for, well, how about 7 generations out? Are you, is your lifestyle something that's killing your family tree off? Is it, eugenics where, you're not even going to have a family and children? Are you wiped out already? Or are you thinking for, your family, your future, and, how many generations out you hope to continue your family? You see, like, everybody has survived up to this point to create us. So what have we done? Right? And so are we going to continue on? Are we going to totally screw up and fail and fall? So, it pertains to that. We're going to be discussing some of the 7 or 8 deadly sins, which is really, when you begin to look at all of the original 7 deadly sins that the Catholics came up, it really coincides with all of the iniquity and fallen behavior that we see in society today.
Correct. Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later. What about you, Chris? What would you say?
Well, I would say that the fallen would be those who are duped from the path of righteousness and truth and led astray, much like what everybody else said. And diversity, it truly is a strength. I'm up here in Canada, and that's a motto for people. But the strength is not for those who are tolerant of diversity, but those who are controlling and who are wishing to impose that upon everybody. They tell you diversity is a strength. It's a strength against us, against to be tolerant of certain types of behavior just because they're different is again falling down that path, I think, of your own demise.
Well
Yeah.
put.
Yeah, well put. Yeah, hopefully maybe a little bit later if we have time, we'll get even more clarity on the diversity subject. Okay, for just for my little addition here, I'll just say that I think it's important to realize when we're talking about the fall that that also implies a climb of sort, um, kind of a growth of sort. And in order to grasp the concepts that we're going to be talking about, you do have to kind of imagine an absolute truth. An absolute truth would then imply um, a responsibility between right and wrong. That would mean that there isn't just a whole bunch of gobbledygook out there and moral relativism for everybody to do whatever. That and just to kind of point this out real quickly, for the people out there who have been kind of skeptical of the direction when we're speaking in some of these, they kind of like to group us in with some sort of a religious, whatever. When I'm speaking about these terms, it's very apparent to me that monotheism and the original sort of ideas that came out of the monotheistic train of thought, whenever you think that was, I'm kind of more on the train of flamenco, but it doesn't matter. You can, however you think monotheism came about, one thing is important, and that is that monotheism is where you kind of got this, there is one God, not this polytheism of a mixture of pantheon of gods, but if there's one God, then that means there's absolute truth. And from a philosophical standpoint, you can kind of see how moral relativism is kind of linked to the quote unquote pagan sort of multi-god
Satanism.
So, I'm trying to, I like to clean my room, so to speak, in my head. I like to organize these trains of thought so I can better understand them. So when I explain them, this is what I mean. I'm organizing everything. Kind of boils down for me in very, people would say, oh, you're too black and white. Well, realistically, from a scientific standpoint, from a philosophical standpoint, and from a monotheistic religious type of a standpoint, whatever your train of thought is, you really have to observe all these patterns that kind of boil down between these ideas, and not to be confused with the principle of gender, the principle of polarity, all these different principles. But just for your frame of mind, that's kind of where we're going with this. Okay, so anything to say on that, guys?
There's lies and there's truth. So if you accept truth as God or God as truth, then you put God or truth as the ultimate. And then obviously everything that deviates from that, there's that division diversity word again. Mm-hmm. Anything that deviates from that is about lies and deception and untruths, which is essentially what Satanism is when you get right down to it. So, it's about learning to see and live in truth in our daily lives. First off, how do you define truth? A lot of people these days, because of quantum physics and this stuff, actually believe that truth doesn't exist. Oh, you think you know the truth. Well, let's get specific on a certain topic. If I've spent years researching something, or even, if you get to a point when all of the contradictions disappear in a topic, you've arrived at the truth. Whenever you see contradictions in a subject, you're not there. A contradiction is always a lie or an error. So when you understand that first premise, and Caleb kind of alluded to this already, but God is the ultimate truth, that mono thing. So when you get to that point and you have that aha moment, you're there. And if there's still contradictions, it doesn't mean you throw your arms up in the air and give up and say opinions are like what. All it means is that you have to dig down further until the division, the diversity, the divisiveness is gone, and then you arrive at the truth. And it can be done on any given topic. So when we begin to look at our lives and society in this way, we can see how this fallen, iniquitous behavior is actually being promoted. And of course, I've spent years exposing the Central Intelligence Agency, the DIA, the ONI, Office of Navy Intelligence, etc., for all promoting the psychedelic 60s revolution and promoting all of the drugs and everything. And, I've done hundreds of shows on that for those who aren't familiar with that. But, so all of this was selling iniquity in the fall that we can all see ourselves in now. So, what we are going to talk about is like all of the things that we can just see out there that show that we are a fallen people now. And then what happens when you're fallen? And that's when you get enslaved,
Exactly. Well said. Stephen, could you add to that at all or expound upon that?
Would you be able to ask that in the form of a question?
Sorry, yeah, I didn't know if you had if either of you have anything to add on that exact
There's
topic.
quite a few different topics there.
But we can move on if you don't have anything specific. I can ask a couple of specific questions if that helps. Unless
let me just jump in there, since the Dashing Rogue just posted with a $5 donation. Is the truth synonymous with facts? And if so, can truth change based on the facts we learn about? Yes, but you have to go through all the facts, and in the trivium, that's going through all of the grammar first, and you have a pattern of all of the research that you've gone through. So you follow the research until the research starts repeating itself, and then once you get to a point where there are no more contradictions and you can't fact check any more of the grammar, you know that you've come to the truth. But it's not synonymous with facts. Facts, unless you're using a specific fact for one point, but, facts are how you get to the truth.
I think it'd be safe to say that the truth has facts, but not all facts have the truth.
Correct.
Yeah, that's good. I would also add that, a lot of people are like, anybody who says, oh, there's no such thing as truth. Okay, well, if I lie to you and I say, something that I know is the truth, and I go out of my way and I know consciously that I'm telling a lie, that everybody's done that and everybody's experienced that in their life directly. It's hard to argue that there is no such thing as the truth, and when you can actually see that which is. When I say truth, what I mean personally is that which is. So when you're talking about the subject of truth, you're really doing your best to try to remove the observer and all of uh, the contradictions and the mix-ups that an observer can have when viewing that which is, and trying to relate that which is to another human is the problem, where you and I may disagree on what we're seeing. So the way that we figure out what is we do our best to align our perceptions with that which is the process of removing contradictions. And we've gone over all of this before, but that's what we mean. What do you, anything to add to that, Chris?
Probably
Well,
just jump in.
I would say that the fallen are those who deny reality.
Correct.
Well,
Wow. Well said.
you know, they choose not to acknowledge that which is. They choose to intellectualize their feelings, so that and that's and I'm dealing, not specifically, but as in Canada right now, we have we've just elected a Republican, or I should say a conservative, if you will, government in Ontario. We had a Liberal government for a while. It's just insanity. The just absolute denial of reality, and just feeding this idea that everybody's equal, everybody's the same, everything, and it's harming people. It really is. And the fact that people do not think for themselves, it is just damaging the future. And look where we're at right now. Yeah, it's a really sad state.
Really well said. I wanted to add there, if I may, and thanks Polygonal Construction for the $4.99. I read this in the Zohar last night, and if you want to understand how they use Kabbalah for lying and manipulating us, you should study the Kabbalah. The devil is always in the details, and they don't want you to look in the details of things so that you can't see the devil's lies. And so let's see, the Zohar says, so whoever wants to tell a lie will first lay a foundation of truth and then construct the lie. So, so first there is a truth, and you know what that truth is, and then you construct the lie on top of it to cover up the truth, right? And so there's always the truth as the foundation of any lie. So, what's interesting at that point is the Satanists, the liars, when you get that quote in the Zohar, the liars and Satanists have to first acknowledge God as truth and then deny that and establish their lie on top of it.
Correct. I would agree with that 100%. What do you think, Stephen? Did you have something to add to that?
No, that covers it.
Okay, so so real quick, I just wanted to say that along those same lines of thinking, when we're talking about this absolute truth and the monotheistic idea of there being truth as the ultimate, pinnacle, that idea kind of leads you. It leads to a couple of other ideas that are really responsible for what we would call the pinnacle of civilization that we've had in the past. And those ideas all sprang from this. So, a lot of philosophers will try to criticize this or that, but in reality, in our direct reality, we can see things that you do have a direct result, and there's an impact, and that's really what the laws, that's how they came about. When people ask me about the Bible, I don't necessarily take it as such a dogmatic literal book. I take it, I read between the lines and I apply it to my understanding, and it makes perfect sense to me along the lines of these people found out what happens when you do A and B, and there are really bad consequences for certain actions. So they wanted to let everybody else know, hey, don't do this, and this is what happens. So let's not repeat the same mistakes in the future. And that's the problem, is we're repeating these problems over and over and over again. And so how do we get ourselves out of it? Well, if we realize what we did in the past to get up to these pinnacles, and I'm also open to the idea that everything happens in ebbs and flows and cycles. However, I would just really like it to be apparent and known to people. I think a lot of the problems that we have in our society is due to ignorance, or a lack of understanding. So maybe if we clarify these things, people will start to make different decisions. And along those same lines, when you have the idea of right and wrong and this monotheistic type of reasoning, that leads one to believe that there is a responsibility to act a certain way. So once you learn that you have a person, you get to decide, but you have to make a decision. Like it's the idea of the conscience, the idea of the angel and the demon on everybody's shoulder, the good wolf, the bad wolf. You get to feed it, and it's a choice we all have to make, and it's a choice between not necessarily polar opposites. There's a scale of decisions. There's a scalar kind of a progression between them all. However, certain actions have consequences. Everything fits into the law of cause and effect. You can't get away from it. So if we understand, if we observe natural law, we figure out what that natural law is and then model our lives around it, I think that would be a good idea, at least in terms of trying to grow. I understand, there are people out there that believe that, they don't want to grow. They want destruction and chaos. And these are the idea. This is the dichotomy between order and chaos. But if you understand that this leads to law, that's why the Ten Commandments came about. And the reason, and the next topic we're going to get into are the seven sins. But just realize, as a kind of a segue into that, your personal responsibility, that gives you the idea of virtue. It leads to the understanding that there is such a thing as virtue, and righteousness is basically the same definition of virtuous. But that allows people to govern themselves, and that's a really big, huge thing I hope people take away from this. Is if, because of the cascade of the ultimate, there is such thing as the ultimate truth, you cascade down the line into, that means we get to take personal responsibility. We don't get to blame anybody else. We have to take responsibility for our health, our mind, our body, our soul. And then at that point, you don't need anybody to govern you. It's the opposite of the community playing the victim and needing a father figure to take care of you. It's the opposite of that. And what we're seeing right now is an inversion of that. And that kind of segues into politics, human behavior, left, right paradigm, all the rest of this stuff that we hopefully will have a chance to get into. Anything to say on that, guys?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you just said it, because I meant to include it in the notes. The blame game. One of the things that you see with the most fallen people is they always blame everyone else for the poor state of their lives. And when you go through all of the different scriptures, whether it's Islamic or Mormon or Christian or whatever, they all talk about how if you do iniquitous behavior, the result of that will be your life is going to be a lot tougher. You're going to have financial troubles. You're going to make poor decisions and everything. And then you fall into a state of that. Now, within Christianity and within, let's say, actually within all three, they all encourage giving to the poor. Not in a sense of like communism, where it's forced upon you, where the communists and socialists come and they take 30, 50%, whatever. I think Bernie Sanders wanted to steal 50%, going around with his Lenin clenched fist, like the when the Russians murdered 60, 70 million people. But so this is, they're going to come and they're going to steal your production to give to the lazy and those who make bad decisions, etc. And they're going to force you to give to that. The Jewish Puritans in Salem, they did the same thing, and it wiped them out in the 1600s. They banned Christmas and giving, and then they forced this commonwealth, which is another word for communism, on everybody else. And we've read the quotes from the governor of, now I'm forgetting the name off the top of my head, it's in my notes, the governor of Massachusetts back in the 1600s was complaining about how their whole society had fallen because of this. So, what's meant to be is that you give from the kindness from your right hand, interestingly, and Christianity dictates that you hide your left hand whenever you do a good deed, because the left is associated with Satanism, the left hand path, and left politics, all of that. So you have to hide your left hand when you give someone money, and you give it to them as that good deed. And so but it's not forced upon you like the lazy communists and socialists want. So you do it out of the kindness of your heart, and then if you remember to do it not trying to earn points to truth or God or what have you, then that's the best way that you can go about it. Charity.
Yeah.
Yeah, charity. I would say charity is always better than taxation, in my opinion. Especially if you're looking into certain things like socioeconomic strategies, the donations always fare better in a society that is a free market. I'm kind of an advocate of a free market, but not in the traditional sense that a lot of people argue, but in a different sense. But as far as taxation is kind of the opposite, where it's forced. It's the difference between consensual sex and rape, if you think about it. And that's why the donations are so much better for people.
Yes, please donate to the show and support all of us, everyone. Please send Chris and Caleb, and I think Steven has a donate thing set up by now, I hope. Yep. And so, we should all be helping, support each other. So thanks for all of that. And, what I want to do soon is get a website set up for the show so that people can go to that and donate to each of us specifically, or to topics or specific things they want, that we're working on or discussing.
Yeah, and just real quick on that other, to go along those same lines with the whole victim mentality and the handout ideology, the welfare stuff about how if I wanted to figure out what's the best way to help a bunch of people, I personally went through the whole welfare, trying to donate my time and energy to help people in need, and I got slapped in the face with a day of reckoning when I went down, and I was seeing people just completely take advantage of the system. And in my opinion, the when we start boiling down this whole left hand path, right hand path, I would like to at some point kind of really get into RK gene selection theory. I'll just mention that. I know we don't have time to get into it, but if people kind of know where I'm going with that, the idea of giving people handouts, it really plays on the whole pathological altruism idea that people can take advantage of your weakness to be compassionate. And that's the one thing that we really have to be careful about, that we're starting to see rampant these days, is people just give up. They say, you know what, I don't feel like taking moral responsibility and working on myself, doing the self work that I need to do in order to have a clean mind, body, and soul, to get to a higher pinnacle, to pull myself out of this rut, this fallen state. It's kind of something that we're unfortunately seeing take over these days.
Why work on yourself when you can point the finger and tell other people to work on themselves?
Thank you, Chris. Chris is just knocking him out of the park every time he opens his mouth.
I've just been stymied at the level of victimization. I see people that are at Yale University crying about safe spaces and have no concept of the fact that they're at Yale University. I mean, how privileged is that? It's shocking to me that everybody is taught to be to look for the victimhood, the Anita Sarkeesians, where she's openly states that everything is sexist, everything is racist, and everything is homophobic, and we have to point it out. And that, how do you win? You have to just use truth, and you have to be able to articulate.
The blame game. It's everybody else. It's not my own poor decision making. It's everybody else's fault for where I'm at. you
And the
know.
empathy, it's like this idea that empathy is always a great thing. Like, just a brief story, just as a personal anecdote. I know this is, it's maybe not evidence, but just something that happened years ago, where I was sitting, having a drink with a friend. It was early evening. We were sitting at this table, and the window was right next to us, and we watched a guy in a electric wheelchair. This guy looked like a homeless person, and he was riding his wheelchair. And instead of going on the ramp area on the sidewalk, he smashed right into the curb. The thing died. We went outside to help move this thing. The police showed up. They knew who the guy was. And it took all four of us to get the thing off the street. It was so heavy. And they told us that he just got this electric wheelchair. He had had a regular wheelchair, and everybody downtown knows the guy. He's a regular drunk. He urinated in the thing while I was standing there. He had had it for a week. People came along. They saw this guy in a regular wheelchair. They thought, we should get him one of those electric wheelchairs. I don't know how much that thing cost, but surely it was expensive. He destroyed it within a week. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. And that's the truth, I think, that is undeniable.
Well, and Mud in the chat just said the middle class carry all the weight, the poor don't pay, and the wealthy have loopholes.
Yeah, and the rubber doesn't meet the road for a lot of the people who have loopholes. These people that are privileged at the university level, who have a higher education, they don't understand that the bone meets the bone at some level, and it becomes violent, and it becomes aggressive, and that's where you find needles and drug dealers and all kinds of really bad things. And they're removed from that. They just look at everything and say, we should be more loving. But is it loving? It's for their own benefit. I feel like they're doing it to make themselves feel better, not to better society. To better society, we should help people help themselves, not to do things for them. I don't think that helps anybody. Hasn't helped
Correct.
me. It hasn't helped me. I'm 51. I have to learn a lot of things now and the hard way, and it's a tough thing. But you know what? It's something I'm glad I'm learning. And I would rather know it than not. So.
Well, good on you for doing it, man. It's not the easy way, that's for sure.
Well,
I know that for sure. So
I'm grateful every single day, every single minute. I can see things that I'm truly blessed. So I appreciate everything I have, and every second I have on the planet. But I do, like, lately I've been some of the jobs I've been doing. I've been working with some pretty underprivileged people, and it's pretty tough, man. And I see these things where it might seem petty to us, but boy, man, they'll fight to the death for something small, like $20. You owe 20. That's like crazy, man. You just want to walk away and just
Yeah.
shake.
Well,
That's
I was watching it to that point, Chris. I was watching something yesterday. 1,200 people a year are killed fighting over tennis shoes and stealing tennis shoes and Air Jordans and stuff like. I mean, it's just complete nonsense, And these people think it's all the rage. But one thing that you hear a lot lately is this in the blame game is white privilege. White privilege. Is it all about white privilege? Are we born with privilege when there's plenty of poor white people out there? Or, do certain groups tend to make less bad decisions than other groups? And if you start thinking about it in that way, it's like, wait, does one group have, more responsibility in their lives than other groups? And then if you start thinking about it in that way, then you realize that, white privilege is just part of the finger pointing blame game. It's blame those others out there rather than looking within.
Divisiveness to divide.
To divide, right?
Yeah, divide and conquer.
yeah, and it really all these concepts come down to back to truth. It's really people who lie and cheat and steal and try to distort the truth are doing so most of the time because it's a backup genetic survival strategy. And unfortunately, we're running rampant on our backup survival strategy as opposed to our strategy that we could use to thrive. And lying, cheating, stealing is you know in a sense is what is the at the essence of this victimhood mentality, this strategy to try to get. It's always has to do with obtaining resources, more money, more food, more something for survival. And they've realized that they can survive without putting in the work to do the thing. So, if we keep giving and giving and giving because we're compassionate enough to try to do this, really what it becomes is almost a sort of enabling. It's the same way that
Oh, yeah.
when you're trying to help a drug addict out, unfortunately, you have to give them the truth is the only thing. And, the truth is the hard pill to swallow. And unfortunately, no one else can do it for you. So you know, there is no way to compassionately help somebody by telling them what they want to hear. You have to give it
Yeah,
to them straight.
exactly. That's the truth. That is.
Let's see, Steven, do you have anything to add? You want to move on to the seven deadly sins?
Yeah, probably should start diving into that.
Yeah,
35 minutes into the show.
yeah, let's do it. Okay, I'll go ahead and let me read the seven deadly sins here. We got pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth. Okay, let's read the definition here. Um, The seven deadly sins, also called seven capital sins or seven cardinal sins, is a Roman Catholic theology. The seven vices that spur other sins and further immoral behavior. First enumerated by Pope Gregory I the Great in the sixth century and elaborated in the 13th century by Thomas Aquinas. Now I have to caveat and just say, see Anatoly Fomenko if you want to
Correct.
know who it really was and when it really was. It makes a lot more sense the way he organizes chronology.
I think it's Aquinas
Not
also.
to segue.
Not to segue, yeah. They are, Aquinas. They are one, vainglory or pride. Two, greed or covetousness, covetousness,
Covetousness.
Covetousness.
covetousness. Three, lust or inordinate or illicit sexual desire. Four, envy. Five, gluttony, which is usually understood to include drunkenness. Six, wrath or anger. And seven, sloth. And I'm sure we can all come up with tons of examples of every single one of these. Let's focus on maybe some of the more prominent ones we see being pushed as a normal thing in our society. Let's talk about
Virtuous.
virtuous. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and each of the seven deadly sins has its direct corresponding antithesis.
Yeah. Do you
Which,
want me to read those?
yeah,
Okay. The corresponding antithesis are um, one is humility, the antithesis of the first sin, which is
Pride.
pride. Yep, let me go through these and get these set up on my page. Okay. The antithesis of greed is charity. Chastity is the antithesis of envy.
and lust.
And, gratitude. Let's see. Did I skip
Probably
one?
be wrath
Yeah.
Did I skip one?
or
Gratitude,
temperance.
wrath. Five is temperance, is the virtue temperance, and six is patience, and seven is diligence.
And we can all work on these, so it's not like we're saying, oh, if you're not perfect in all of these. I mean, all of us have some of these that we're always working on and trying to get to and live in truth all the time. So if anything is taking you away from these points, that's taking you into iniquity and taking you into the fall rather than rising out of the fall and into a better position.
Yes, correct. The first stage is to take accountability and to realize that your actions directly affect yourself. And when you do that, you realize there's a reason. We're not just These aren't just laws given to us by some, you know, spiteful God that wants us to follow these laws for no reason. This is these Whether you believe whoever gave these laws or whoever came up with them, it doesn't matter. The fact is they have direct effects on your life and the society's life around you. Correct? One of the one of the things that we're seeing run rampant these days when we're talking about sexual depravity, which is a big thing a big topic that I've been on because Anatoly Fomenko is kind of showing some of the deeper reasons why we see these patterns, and eventually we'll learn this stuff. I think right now we're kind of we're stuck in the repeating cycle, but I'm sure everybody kind of has an idea of how ridiculous the sexual depravity. It's like the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. We're seeing
Absolutely.
right here in America, especially, but I'm sure in
Oh, yeah.
Europe. Unfortunately, Europe might even be a little bit worse in Germany, Sweden, man, Ireland. It's really sad. They're pushing. They got the Pride festivals out, and I just
Well,
learned
and
about.
and let's, you're jumping ahead there because and I want to bring that up because gay pride, black pride, all of that stuff, that's one of the 7 deadly sins. And so, now they are out there promoting the utmost depravity as pride, and we should accept it. We should be accepting of iniquitous behavior because it's prideful. Well, if you look up in the hold on as I pull it up here in the Oxford English Dictionary, and I've posted this before because I started looking at this about 6 months ago or so. Here, let me just get rid of some of these. See, personified especially as the first of the 7 deadly sins. Okay, notice it's not just a sin, it's the deadly sins. Okay. So exhibits of this quality in attitude, bearing, conduct, or treatment of others, arrogance and haughtiness. So that's pride. And so that's what people, who go through all of these pride things, black pride, white pride, gay pride, whatever it is, Latino pride, the word pride is one of the 7 deadly sins because of this. And people think, it's a good thing to go to these pride parades. It should be a clue. The name is, the warning is in the title. Let's see. So, and there were some of these others. Hold on. I was just looking for some of these others here. Worldly pride or ostentation. So to be ostentatious is like a braggart, right? So that's not good. How could that possibly be good? Sexual desire, heat, but so that's just some of these. But let's see. To display proudly, to be made or become proud. And it's one thing for a parent to be proud of their child for successfully completing a task. It's another to go, parade about in the streets, in your underwear, dressed as Captain America or whatever, and, doing iniquitous behavior. And it's iniquitous because, is it in truth? When, the Bible says they shall know you by your fruit. Well, if you're doing transgender homosexual behavior, are there any fruits of your production? Where are your children? Where is the fruit of your loins? So are you furthering your family generations, your family tree, or is it cut off and you're out? And if it's cut off and you're out, if you're not thinking 7 generations out, that's probably not good. It's not good, honest behavior. It does not coincide with the laws of nature, and your family tree is cut off. You're gone. And that's what it actually means to be damned.
Well said.
Yes, sir. And I think to anyone who really looks into it, I think it's pretty clear that there's this agenda being pushed, and it's not being pushed particularly on one side of the political spectrum. It's I think everybody kind of realizes that there's these patterns that we see that happened in the Bolshevik Revolution, and pretty much all these communist takeovers of the country, these coups. You start to realize there's kind of a game plan here. It's this right hand path and the left hand path playing out on the world stage, which isn't just a false dichotomy like some people think. Oh, politics is all just no. It's a reflection of the human behavior, not just of the human behavior, but of natural law, which we observe and we model human laws and human behavior after. So, I think it just needs to be said. this is an agenda. This idea that we can lower our consciousness down to our lowest level, which is down at our root, right? Which is completely sexual pleasure rather than a higher enlightened understanding of what you are, what we are, where we're going, and thinking in the future about certain things. It's more of like a, as opposed to thinking now so that we don't have to worry about problems in the future. It's the opposite inversion of that. It's let's just do whatever makes us feel good now, and who cares about the future.
Correct.
Hey, shout your abortion, come on, let's, promote all this life ending, activities. Let's look at it as being virtuous and a good thing, articles about, hey, I'm 25 and I've had 3 abortions already, like that type of thing is being promoted.
Absolutely.
Batman's stepmom, was a great, a massive force against us, back in the 60s.
Well, hey,
with
women are
Stein.
free, and see, women today have a distorted concept of freedom because Gloria Steinem, who was a CIA agent, self-admitted, and the CIA have really been behind the whole promotion of feminism, et cetera, for decades now. And people who don't believe us about Gloria Steinem and CIA, just do a YouTube search and it'll pop right up of her admitting, and it's right on the CIA's website as well.
She's
But
actually on video even.
she's on video, and
Yeah.
I do have it in the brain database here. I'll just pull it up for those of you
Like
who
Mike Wallace or something like that.
right. So let me just pull that up here. And I might quote Miss Gloria Steinem, one of those so assisted, who commented that the CIA wanted to do what we wanted to do, present a healthy, diverse view of the United States. I never felt I was being dictated to at all. And that's DCI or Director Central Intelligence William Colby quoting Gloria Steinem. That's right on the CIA's own website here. So, people can find that in the online database and go and read that document for themselves. But Miss Gloria Steinem, Playboy Bunny, who promotes abortions and all of this stuff. See, they're trying to destroy us. And so they're going to promote all of this iniquity to destroy our families and our futures and all. And who does that benefit? Does that benefit you and your family? Are you in your future? Are you free? Does freedom mean that you just get to go run around and do iniquitous behavior? Or are you free to have your family and your generations live on forever? Are you free to have a good life? Are you living in truth? And so, that is the trick here. So it's about constant self-improvement. It's about trying to live essentially like Christ, to perfect ourselves, to live as the ultimate person in truth. And we'll never get there, but we strive to be that way.
Exactly. Now, one thing real quick. We shouldn't get too much involved in some of the last few topics we've been talking about, because we're going to segue next week right into the fall of the family, or the destruction of the nuclear family, and go real in depth into a lot of the feminism and abortion and stuff like that. So we'll save the deep stuff for next week, hopefully. But Stephen, anything to say on what we were talking about as far as like maybe pride, the deadly sin of pride?
Yeah, pride has, a lot of downsides when it becomes an issue. If you're amongst your group of friends and you keep talking about, oh yeah, guys, my research going great. I'm just one of the best researchers out here right now, just sort of doing my thing, killing it. Just I don't really know anyone else that's in the same league as me, dude. I'm just so beyond my time. Stuff like that. People are gonna be like, what the hell, dude? Like, how do you even judge that? I guess pride that's kind of how I've always seen it. Showing humility is, you can still, I guess people even get on you for that now with the humble brag, but like, it's okay to like count your blessings and talk about what's good to inform other people. But when it becomes excessive, to the point that, it's sort of distorting what's actually true, that's when it becomes an issue. So humility, again, is more so the correct definition of what you're going for there and trying to communicate your gains in life. for pride.
Yeah, very well put. I would also like to add that it's important that we kind of define our key terms here. Like, I don't necessarily think that um, being proud of like your ancestors' achievements is necessarily a bad thing, as long as you're not doing it in a condescending, I'm better than you, cocky type of a feel to it. I don't know. What do you guys think? Am I off base by
Well,
saying that?
I'm more honored by my family, I
Yeah.
guess. And with regards to pride, it's my understanding that pride is the deadliest of all the seven deadly sins, and it's also my understanding that it actually um, the other six came from pride from that the art was the Satan, the angel, was proud and he was cast from heaven, uh, something like that, if I recall correctly. But you have the righteous path and you have the sinister path, or the left hand path. And I always wondered, sinister is such a mean word, and I had no idea for the longest time that it actually coincided with the left hand. So I find that kind of interesting as well. In the words we find these things out. Something very common. And I always thought pride was a good thing, but now I second guess that for the last couple years.
Even the talking about defining our terms, the word hubris, we have it in the show notes, is defined as excessive pride or excessive self-confidence. So everything in moderation is appropriate.
Yes, sir. Okay, yeah. Everything needs to, as far as communication goes, we got to make sure we're clear on our definitions. Let's see, things can change if we're not talking about the the same meanings. Let's see here. What else we got? Um, the seven deadly sins can be thought of as dispositions towards sin and separation from God. Lust, for example, could result in adultery, which is a mortal sin, or could lead to somewhat less intentional immoral thoughts that would be classified as venial sins. The deadly sins were a popular theme in the morality plays, literature, and art of the Europeans in the Middle Ages.
Hey,
It's even
just really quickly, somebody's asking, Polygonal is asking for ways to donate to Chris and Steven. So could you both give out your
yeah. Let
donation
me
information?
pull up
Oops,
my
sorry about
PayPal
that.
here.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
So yeah, I'll bring that up in just a second. But
Or just
as
post it in the chat so that people can respond to that. Sorry.
Yeah.
yeah,
Mine's the Mave at THEMAYV at gmail.com. You can send it to me through that.
And if you want to pull up the chat, Chris, and
Yeah,
just post it in there, that might help too.
Yeah, I should do that.
So, and thank you for the $50 donation that just came in. I much appreciate that. One thing that I wanted to say regarding the seven deadly sins. So, first off, if you start off with the concept that your body is your temple, and well, do you go into the temple and start spray painting it and destroying it and doing all of this bad stuff? But if you treat your body with the utmost care that you would a temple, okay, are you drinking alcohol? Are you committing fornication and having sex with multiple partners where you could get disease? Wrath or ire, anger, that's another one that I just found out, and I got to work on that one. Then that's one of the deadly sins too. So, and then we've already covered pride, hubris, all of these things. So, when you focus as your body, as your temple, okay, well then I want to live in truth. I want to do what's in truth. I want to have a solid partner that I can build a family and future with. I want to put food in my body that's the most healthily. Those of you who lie to yourselves out there in the audience and still eat wheat when we've been exposing the wheat scandal for 7-8 years now, and how dangerous and poisonous it is, you can go back. There's old scriptures that talk about, using wheat only in times of famine and excess of hunger. And, so people need to understand that these things are important. You can use wheat or grains as a staff or a supportive life during famine and whatnot, but you shouldn't be eating this junk all the time. Thanks, Polygonal and Goku, for the $10 and $4.99 donations. So,
Yeah, and it seems you can't comment your links on your thing here.
what's that?
I can't comment my link here.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm approving them right now. So Chris has just showed up. You should be able to post yours. I don't know why you can't, but Chris's should be showing now. What is yours, Steve? I'll post it.
It's the paypal.me/president trip.
/president trip.
Trip.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's for Steve's PayPal donation link. But, so when we begin to focus on all this stuff, okay, so what is our self-presentation like about our temple? Are we covering our bodies with tattoos? Do we wear nice clothing? So like if you look at photographs of the 1950s and 60s, well, up to the 1960s, throughout, all the way up until the end of the 50s, people dressed well. You didn't go outside. My grandparents didn't go out without nice clothing on and without dressing up. You put on a sport jacket, you put on slacks, etc., and you went out looking nice.
For American culture.
Today people put on a t-shirt. What was a t-shirt? A t-shirt was your underwear, your undershirt. So people are actually going out today, and I do it too, going out in your underwear. So what kind of clothes? Do we all wear, cheesy baseball caps? And it's like you start realizing you put on a nice, Stetson fedora, or a nice, Caleb and I were talking about earlier, putting on a cowboy hat, and suddenly you realize, well, wait, what the heck am I wearing? I'm wearing, junky clothes and everything, and then suddenly you want to start dressing accordingly for the hat. But, a nice fedora or whatever, suddenly it's like, well, shoot, I should be wearing a suit to go with a nice hat. And I was telling these guys the other day, I have a whole hat conspiracy theory. All they had to do was change the hat, get everybody wearing baseball caps, and, and you can degrade everybody's dress. So, we're all out there wearing, T-shirts and stuff, and then the latest set of degradation going out there is people wearing, these huge nose rings. Well, when I was a kid, bowls, and if you went to the circus, the bears would have those big rings in their nose, and they would, when I lived in Europe, the bears on the streets would have those nose rings. And today, everybody has these crazy nose rings that used to be for livestock and whatnot. So, we can see, some of these crazy nose rings and stuff out there. And it's, how are we treating our temple? Are we using it for good? Here's another one. I'm showing some of these images on screen. These huge holes that you see in people's ears now. And they put these huge discs, and, it's all about the archaic revival that Terrence McKenna, who was a CIA agent, promoted all of this nonsense. And it was to get people to, your culture is bad. You got, because Indians lived this way thousands of years ago, that's good, you're bad. So that was the agenda, to break our current culture. Your culture is how you keep things together. So, of course, SRI and the CIA and Tavistock and the Frankfurt School and the Royal Society are attacking these things. So, that's to their benefit, not to ours. And people need to realize that, that doing stuff like this to yourself, well, this guy's got his Doberman pincher's noses through his ear holes. Is that really how, I feel sorry for this guy who's done this to himself. But, and this is obviously an extreme case. He's cut his tongue. He's got a forked tongue, so it's just diving as far into iniquity as possible. But, in my best estimation, he's probably feels pretty terrible about himself because he's not living in truth. Now, here's another one here. This is like a 6 or 7 inch diameter hole in this poor guy's ears. Oops, where did it go? I just switched it. But, so when we see that all of this stuff is falling, people are fallen. This is what fallen is. This is your temple. So, does he look happy? And
it's
so,
interesting. Sorry, that a forked tongue would be devilish. It would lean towards the dark side. It's interesting that someone would go out of their way to try to look that way.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, sorry.
So, yeah, and I kind of went on a tangent there, but, and then you think about drinking and, alcohol, smoking, even and it's even like Robert and I have talked about this. Swearing and cussing is another one. So all of this stuff goes down to iniquitous behavior. It's like, how are we presenting ourselves? And I've thought about starting to just wear a suit all the time because you feel better when you go out. People treat you with more respect when you're dressed up.
Oddly enough, that's, for the last 13 years, I've been walking around with a pair of jeans and a t-shirt on, often with some type of logo on the t-shirt. And for the last 4 months, I've had to dress up for work, and people treat you totally different. You treat yourself differently as well. We're wearing slacks and a shirt, dress shoes every day when I go out. It does make a big difference.
And then there's things like Burning Man. We couldn't, go the whole show without at least getting a mention of it in. And then, or the film Idiocracy. I mean, that's the ultimate fallen state. For those of you who haven't watched Idiocracy 15 or 20 times, you really should, because that is what's going on.
Yeah, all these topics we're discussing, it's not just that we think or we believe that these things are bad because God told us or something like that. It's that we directly witness in our everyday life problems that occur as a result of these things in our lives and in the lives of our children. For people who want a little bit more information on some of the research, I have a ton of research with hundreds of links of studies with and data points that are all showing the side effects and the problems that we're having nowadays. I don't think you even necessarily need it to be proven to you. You can just look around and observe it. As long as you understand, you can also see if you do a little bit of research in history as well. When you look in history and you look at something like the Frankfurt School, where they came up with critical theory, this is a school that decided they were going to just flip and invert everything. They moved from America to America and infested their ideologies. They fled World War II, came here, started up the whole Frankfurt School, critical theory. This is the same ideas that they had in Bolshevik Russia, and this cascaded into, what did you expect was going to happen? They try to turn everything upside down and invert it upside down, and that led to the ideas that we see in Hollywood today. In Hollywood, what do we see? Everything is cultural Marxism. Everything. And they're pushing this agenda, and as soon as you become savvy to it and you realize it, it becomes very apparent that this is being pushed on us.
Now, here's the thing: is if you have family and extended family, do you need socialism and communism? Or if you're like, some of these homosexuals and this stuff, and you're not going to have family and extended family, and there's no generations coming after you to support you in old age, are you going to need communism and socialism to support you? And the answer is absolutely yes. These type of people absolutely need communism and socialism to pay for their survival, because they do not have families. They do not reproduce. Their family tree is over. It's done. And so, we see directly correlated with the promotion of transgenderism and homosexuality and all of these things, we see a constant increase and ramp up of soft communism or socialism, and then communism itself. And of course, the purpose of socialism is to get people into communism. And we haven't even hardly gotten on the other topics yet. We've been going for over an hour. We still, I've got pictures of, like people. I just want to show some of these, like people on the beach in the 1950s. And, you can look at everybody on the beach here. There's thousands of people here, and they all look, almost all of them look very healthy. You don't see anybody who's obese. What's the difference? People ate a high-fat, high-cholesterol diet. They didn't eat a lot of grains back then. And people were overall healthy. Now today, and I've got more that I want to show here. Here we have in the 70s, and still we see everybody is healthy. People look good, so what has happened? Look at how people look, and we go through, and you can go out, today, and you go to the beach today, and it's covered with obese people. In the 90s, you start to see people with tummies showing up, and it just kind of grows out from there. And today we're facing an obesity epidemic, a sharp rise in childhood obesity from 1971 to 2007. And I mean, look at this. It's just a huge jump in obesity, and it's all from eating soda pop and grains and inflammatory foods. So, how are you treating your temple? Are you eating garbage and crap? Are you believing the low fat, low cholesterol lie? Are you believing that you should eat your whole grains, which is a poison? Or are you eating vegetables and meat, which is what we're designed to eat? And I'm sorry, all you vegans and vegetarians. I was one for years. It put me in the ICU and almost killed me. So treat your body with respect. And your body tells you when you live in truth if you're treating it well or not. If you have lots of gas and stomach problems and you're obese, you have eczema, acne, psoriasis, schizophrenia, all of the different diseases mainly associated with wheat and low-fat diet, well, that's a problem. You can't be living that way.
I agree, man. The body, everything you put in it. That's a great example of the idea of fallen. You're taking, obviously, if you don't have a good body, if you don't have good genetics, B, functioning, systems of the body, how are you going to elevate yourself out of a fallen state up into a higher frame?
You're going to devolve.
Exactly. So, what do you think, Stephen? Anything to say on the diet stuff?
Yeah. A lot of advertisers have capitalized on human weakness to be able to sell you an idea of something rather than the actual product itself, as in like putting a model up eating a giant burger from McDonald's or something. You've got some anorexic chick on the beach smiling and holding a burger, or Red Bull gives you wings type deal, like, oh yeah, this is really going to take you places. If you drink this Red Bull, Monster as well. People die from drinking Monsters. Makes you wonder why people would drink them.
And what happens when you drink Red Bull and you get wings? You go up. They pander to your idea. All these ideas are inherent in our genetic memory.
The Monster Drink factory is like 35 minutes from me here in over in Riverside, Corona area, and it's like, and if you look at that, it's the symbol of the Monster Drink is actually 666 in Hebrew. And it's like just right in your face, And I was at the restaurant today, and there was a family, each of them with Monster drinks, and the wife was very obese, very abusive, and the husband was very meek and very beta, and as she was telling him what he was going to have for lunch and all of this stuff, it was just really a sight of the fallen stuff that's happening out there today.
So on top of all that, beyond the advertising, I just wanted to mention that because that's kind of where it started, was with advertisers and bankers and stuff like that. It became more of a science later in the 30s and 40s and 50s. Is Jan and Caleb, I know for sure, are aware of a lot of that stuff that went down with the Macy conferences and the MK Ultra studies and leading into educational reform and whatnot. That really played a part in creating all of these different fractions of life for you to occupy. You might be stuck in the 80s still wearing a perm, or you might be in the 90s with your ripped jeans, or early 2000s you may still cut because it's emo or something, or you might, I don't even know, the list is endless. You could be splitting your tongue, gauging your ears, doing all sorts of things that are not really all that important or even relevant to.
But you're free.
Yeah, exactly. It's this individualism that is ultimately just covetous type, pride type deals where I want to be like that. And no, yeah, now I'm like that. Look at how cool I am. I got the newest jeans from Hollister. Like, I don't know, but that's kind of what I'm getting at. It evolved from just advertising and trying to get people to buy your product into advertising philosophies and how to get people really wound up in some of these ideas. You get one philosophy in life and you really stick to that, even if it's just ridiculous. A lot of these Crowley followers or McKenna followers, they don't know much about the heroes. They read like a book or something, or even just like a paragraph from a chapter out of the book while they were on acid. And now
They heard some of those audios I released back in the early 2000s on mistake. Worst mistake I ever made. Putting that stupid McKenna audio out there.
Part of the degradation even goes into people don't even know. They'll be like, oh yeah, Aristotle was a very wise man, or Plato knew all these great things. And I'll ask them, well, what's your favorite writing from them? And they're like, oh, well, I haven't actually read anything from them, but I knew a guy that knew a dude that went to college, and his professor said that Plato really had some good ideas on republics and whatnot.
Well, so, here's a good point to what you just said, Stephen, is what I see going on out there is like, so people don't read the philosophers anymore. They quote their rock idols. They're rock idols, right? Yeah. And you're not supposed to have graven images. So how ironic that they call them rock idols to begin with. And this buddy Dave I had who killed himself back in 2010, he would go around quoting Jim Morrison as his hero, why he wasn't going to live past his 30s or whatever. And, his whole life was based on rocker philosophy. Just, all his rock idols just totally fallen. And he wiped himself out. He's no longer.
Live for today. A lot of this comes out of the Warner Bros. Music records. They create a lot of the idols and fund a lot of the music that's produced. Some of these new mumble rappers like Lil Pump or Lil Uzi Vert and stuff like that are signed by these bigger producers like Warner Bros. Records or Atlantic Records. And these are now the people that everyone is quoting. Even Prince is signed by Warner Bros., Madonna's Warner Bros. You've got Avenged Sevenfold, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Linkin Park, a lot of these really famous bands that you might hear in your teenage years, and you just connect with that and you love them.
Nostalgia, that's how they get you right there.
Yeah. So you hold them up with the highest esteem, and
the guys with socks on their cocks, they were really cool,
Yeah.
Red Hot Chili Peppers, woohoo, Santa Monica Beach area and whatnot. That's all the SoCal thing. And and then you grow up and you start seeing how iniquitous these guys were. But it's like Hans and my series, Music, Mind Control, and Psychobiology. That's so important to get, because then you get that all of this stuff is uniforms, and each type of band or each type of music has a uniform that they wear. The punkers, the heavy metalers, the new agers, the new wavers, the Burning Man people, the Grateful Dead people, et cetera, et cetera. It's all divide and conquer.
I'm even going to interject and mention a book I read a few years back. It's called If I Told You, I'd Have to Kill You. And it's all about the development of secret societies and the Black Project realm of government. And one of the first stories in the book is about when they first started including patches for their uniforms and stuff. And supposedly, I haven't looked into it, but supposedly a military officer had come upon another group of soldiers that were not under his command, but he thought they were because the suits were similar. And so he scolded them for slacking off or something, and then was later embarrassed by it all. And so they started adding patches and different segments. So you can see a lot of the different patches. I know I see some of the more common ones are the NASA patches with the rockets on them. And I had took some notes on this a while back, but that was the origin of the development of these different patches. And now, if you go and you look into some of the music scenes, that is poured over from the government sector into the public sector, and people identify with the people that wear their patches. So you get these hats where people put tons of patches on. In the music scene around here, there's people will sell their patches at shows, and you can put patches on your vests and on your backpacks, and then you can know that those people are part of your group and they're cool because they got the same patches. You guys like the same music and you're in the same group, and so that's another interesting thing.
Well, you
that
know, back in the Tartar days, you would have had your plaid that would identify your tribe or your group. So they've taken it away from the family and kin and applied it to these militaristic type groups that were manufactured for us and our families. You know, the military does that again, the punk rockers, the rock heavy metalers, all of that. Those are all manufactured, created uniforms. And each of these people think that they're being individuals when they put on that uniform.
And so, to even add on to that, the family crest is what we used to have for royal families and families with honor. You could understand what factions of the family were doing what based off of their crest. Now, you probably don't know what your family crest is, but you definitely know the logo of your favorite band because they're so cool.
Dead Kennedys, man.
The people that released an album about
Chris has got something to say.
Oh
he's
yeah,
he's been wanting to say it for the last like 5 minutes.
Oh, sorry, Chris.
The family.
No, it's all good. Logos are logos, and they're definitely, used for advertising, and that is definitely for sure. And I can't think of anything more satanic than the worshiping of men, and that's what they do. They promote these idols, and these people are flawed. Even now, they've got Kanye West, and they're trying to show how red-pilled he is. Yet, the man still stands there talking about what a genius he is. I failed to see any genius, but that's a personal preference, right? That it comes down to, from my perspective, that they will buy our genes and be an original. That it's that idea of that contradiction where you are going to be a fan of this, you're going to be a Misfits fan, you're going to wear your hair a certain way, and you're going to look totally different than the Cure fan who used to wear their hair a certain way compared to the heavy metal person who had long hair. And these things are sold to us, just like the idea of different types of meditation are sold to different types of people. You're going to fall into the net, and that's the way it is. It's all one big spider web or series of spider webs for people to fall into. And then they sell the anti-hero. That is who we see as the person like the Walter White of the world, the guy that you want to empathize with, but he's a horrible individual, the Vic Mackey from The Shield, or Walter White from Breaking Bad, or these very popular shows where the person that you're following is a really despicable individual, and yet you're rooting for this individual. And I find that this is the whole thing. It's just pulling you from a higher level down into the muck, and people like to be there. They want to watch all these things. How many people loved watching the Apprentice? I imagine many of those people hate Donald Trump now, but they watched that show. I didn't watch the show. I never watched these backstabbing shows, but people love to see these things. We've got a society, that I think the Colosseum is never a concept that will ever go out. People will dogpile and jump on. I see it happening all the time. Political correctness. Somebody says something out of turn, and next thing you know, it's like every finger's pointing towards them. And that's the whole construct. I think it's all set up for all these things are set up, and you can't be this because you're that, and you can't accept people for what they say. People don't respect other people. I talk to people who are apologists for all kinds of things. For Islam is a great example. They don't want to read the books. They don't want to read or take seriously what people say. They just want to, oh no, well, that's not what they mean. And the lack of respect people have for other people's words. They don't take people at their word. They just impose their own feely things on them. I'm sorry to go off on this weird tangent.
Chris, they do that to me all the time. You see it on,
Absolutely. So anyway, I'm sorry I got that out.
Oh no, that's good. That was definitely good. One thing here, I don't think we're going to be able to get through.
I'm gonna read some of these. I've deleted some and highlighted them, so I'll read some of the good ones if you want me to.
Cool. Yeah, go ahead.
So let's see. These are just some scriptural quotes here, and I didn't manage to pull any from the Quran today. I was planning on it, but so let's see. For I confess my iniquity, I am full of anxiety because of my sin. And let's see here. I'm just going to skip through some of these and try
What
to.
verse is that?
Oh, sorry. Thank you. That was Psalms 38:18, and then let's see, Psalms 25:11. For your name's sake, O Lord, pardon my iniquity, for it is great. I'm going to try to get to some of the better ones here. But your iniquities, and this is Isaiah 59:2. But your iniquities have made a separation between you and your God, and your sins have hidden his face from you, so that he does not hear. And behold, I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. And that's Psalms 51:5. This is Exodus 34:7. Keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, and that will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children and upon the children's children unto the third and fourth generation. So when we get into iniquity, the Bible is saying it goes on. It can affect your family for 3 or 4 generations if it doesn't wipe you out totally. And what you got to get is like, people say, well, they're quoting the Bible or whatever. But, when you get that the Bible is exposing what this behavior is and living in truth versus not living in truth, and what the Bible says, any deception, lies, sin, etc., that's Satanism. It's rejecting truth and living and accepting lies over truth. And so let's see. I will visit their transgression with the rod and their iniquity with stripes. And just a couple more, or a few more here. Leviticus 26:39. And they that are left of you shall pine away their iniquity in your enemies' lands, and also in the iniquities of their fathers they shall pine away with them. And then Proverbs 24:17. Don't gloat when your enemy falls, and don't let your heart rejoice when he stumbles. And Proverbs 24:16. For though a righteous man falls 7 times, he will rise again. So a righteous person in your life, you're going to fall 7 times, but you rise again. But the wicked stumble into calamity. And so, we can see, all of these groups that, that use the blame game to blame everybody. That's the wickedness, and they've stumbled into calamity, and then they want to blame everyone for their own place that they've fallen to. And then Psalms 37:23 through 24. Or let's see, I think I have both. Let's see. The Lord directs the steps of the godly. He delights in every detail of their lives. Though they stumble, they will never fall, for the Lord holds them by the hand. So it's like, okay, you might stumble and screw up, but you still get the point that it's about truth and living in truth. And let's see, Ecclesiastes 4:9 through 12. 2 people are better than one. In other words, if you think about this in terms of marriage, because together they have a good reward for their hard work. If one falls, the other can help his friend get up. But how tragic is it for the one who falls alone when he falls? There is no one to help him get up. Again, if 2 people lie down together, they can keep warm. But how can one person keep warm? Though one person may be overpowered by another, 2 people can resist one opponent. A triple braided rope is not easily braided rope is not easily broken. And then there's some other good ones I have here, but I think that's good enough. But I find it interesting that divers, going for the dive or the fall down, and diversity and division are so close to each other. But I had one quote I wanted to read, unless somebody else wants to read it down there at the end of the show notes.
The show notes in the description.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and read it, and then So this is from the Coen brothers film No Country for Old Men. Ellis, If you'd have told me 20 years ago I'd see children walking in the streets of our Texas town with green hair, bones in their noses, I just flat out wouldn't have believed you. Bell. Signs and Wonders. Ellis. But I think once you quit hearing sir and ma'am, the rest is soon to follow. Bell. Oh, it's the tide. Ellis. Yeah, it's the dismal tide. It's not the one thing. Bell. It's not the one thing. So they're not just attacking us and creating the fall with one thing. They're promoting all of the different 7 or 8 deadly sins and all of these different manners to create the fall. You get rid of disrespect. You know, people don't even know what a lady or a gentleman is anymore. They honestly don't know what those words even mean anymore, to act appropriately and with honor and in truth. People don't get honor anymore.
Yeah, unfortunately, we've got to dig ourselves out of this hole. This is kind of a big deal, and I'm glad we're talking on it. It's too bad we don't have time to go in depth a little bit more. We really wanted to get it through this outline. We got barely even a quarter's way through it. Maybe perhaps next time we can talk about some of these things that will definitely segue over into the nuclear family, the destruction of the nuclear family. We did want to get into a lot of things we could counter this with. We didn't want to just give the doom and gloom. We wanted to talk about discipline and respect and honor and in all these ways that we could kind of get back in the game here. But looks like we're not going to have time to go too much in depth with any of that this week. So perhaps next week we can get to that.
Maybe we should, use a little nostalgia for the closing. What do you think, Chris?
Sure.
Let's see. I think I have something right here. Let's see if you all can hear it. Oh, it's not feeding through the... I'm going to have to do a screen share and share the audio here. Here we go. Maybe it's not even coming through. Darn it. I'll have to... Well, it's playing Chris's intro song. I'll have to...
Too funny. Thank you.
Happy now. Oh, dope for tea and dope for dinner, fun all night and love and laughter. No remorse.
So, and that's, of course, written by Aldous Huxley, the social engineer for all of this fallen, iniquitous behavior that the CIA sold us for the last, since 1947, essentially. But, we took their own crap and flipped it back on them. Thanks, Chris, for doing such a good job. You whipped this out in like 40 minutes, too, man. It's great.
Well, I saw the post on Facebook, and I was sitting right there. I had a bunch of gear right in front of me, and I just started plucking away. I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah.
Once it started going, I had to get it over to ASAP. So
it's great. So thanks for that. Thanks for all your support. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Please shoot Chris and Steve and Caleb and myself at Logos Media. Please shoot us all donations. We're going to, like I said, try to get a Logos Roundtable website up soon so people can find that stuff there. But you want to all give out your information?
Yeah, mine is mick.caleb@gmail.com.
Steve?
You can get a hold of me at Steven Sorensen at protonmail.com. It's spelled just like my name is here on the screen without the space.
Without the space, there you go.
Protonmail.com, proton.com.
And Chris?
It's themayv@gmail.com. And may I also just, if you have an opportunity and you like hard rock music, I play in a hard rock band called Thy Kingdom Slum. It is definitely talking about the fallen. A lot of we have put out a 5-song EP in February, and you can check it out on Spotify and all that stuff, iTunes. It's Thy Kingdom Slum. If you get a chance and you like that kind of stuff, it's a lot of fun and socially conscious, at least to what we're talking about. A lot of the songs have meaning. And the very last line of the last song on the record is, "You got to use your mind." And I strongly recommend people do so. Thank you.
Great. And thanks, Chris. I mean, you had some real doozies tonight. Really appreciate you coming on. And thanks to Caleb for moderating and running the show tonight. Thanks, Steve, for all your great input.
So
And
all in all, can humans devolve?
absolutely, and I think that evolution is actually an inversion. I think we actually devolve through iniquitous behavior. And so you devolve, that you either degrade into some other species or you wipe your family tree completely out.
Yeah, let's make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Let's
Wouldn't that be the tree of life, your family tree, the tree of life, maybe?
yes, sir. The tree of life, your family tree. If you don't have deep planted roots, then you're just a pushover. So make sure you honor your family. Realize it's very important to have roots, and at least try. If you don't have deep family roots now, it's not like you're lost. You can start now. We can start now. We can start fresh. We can start to build a family. We don't have to always play the victim, and we can stop immediately, and we can take responsibility, and from this day forward we can work to fix the wrongs and get better.
I think you just answered Thomas Tyson's question perfectly. Can humans stop devolving? I think you just nailed it out of the park on that one. So I think that's a wrap. You guys have anything else to add?
No, thank you very much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone, and see you next week, this Tuesday on Unspun number 124, maybe. Hans Utter is going to be back. A lot of people have been asking for him, so don't miss Tuesday, day after tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific time. And thanks, everyone, for your support and donations. Good night.
Good
Bye,
night.
everyone. Thank you.